Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, voting yes. Sir Williams, voting yes. Sir Wayne, voting yes. Sir Walls, voting yes. Sir Vargas, voting yes. Sir Stinner, voting yes. Sir Slama, Sir Sanders, voting yes. Sir Pansy Brooks, voting yes. Sir Pauls, Senator Merman, voting yes. Sir Moser, voting yes. Sir Moorfield, Senator Moorfield, voting yes. Thank you. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Sir McDonald, voting yes. Sir McAllister, voting yes. Sir Lowe, voting yes. Sir Linehan, voting yes. Sir Lindstrom, voting yes. Sir Lathrop, voting yes. Sir Coulterman, voting yes. Sir Jacobson, voting yes. Sir Hunt, Sir Hughes, voting yes. Sir Hickelman, voting yes. Sir Hildress, voting yes. Sir Matt Hanson, voting yes. Sir Ben Hanson, Sir Holleran, voting yes. Sir Gregert, voting yes. Sir Geist, voting yes. Sir Friesen. Was that a yes? Thank you. Voting yes. Sir Flood, voting yes. Sir Erdman, voting yes. Sir Dorn, voting yes. Sir DeBoer, voting yes. Sir Day, Sir Clements, voting yes. Sir Michaela Kavanaugh, Sir John Kavanaugh, Sir Breesy, voting yes. Sir Brewer, voting yes. Sir Brandt, voting yes. Sir Bostelman, voting yes. Sir Bostar, voting yes. Sir Blood, voting yes. Sir Arch, voting yes. Sir Albright, voting yes. Sir Aguilar, voting yes. Senator Ben Hanson, voting yes. 43 ayes, no nays, 6 excused, not voting, Mr. President.
LBA 73 passes. Moving to the agenda item, motions to override gubernatorial vetoes. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, with respect to that item, I have a motion. Senator Stinner, as chair of the Appropriations Committee, would move that legislative bill 1011 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Stinner, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are passing out some exhibits I think that will be helpful to follow the veto override. It kind of breaks down numerically all the verbiage into numbers. Obviously, we have 3 bills, and the Appropriations Committee met and passed 9-0, 9-0, and 8-1 on the 3 different bills that we will be working on. As I started out, maybe we need to kind of reflect where we've been with this budget process since this is a biennium, and I want to go through again where we were at sine die and what the financial status was and what we did. And we checked a lot of boxes last session, checked a lot of boxes as it relates to tax relief. The tax credit, the income tax credit actually rose to $548 million, which I think taxpayers now are starting to understand that we actually have done something on property tax. We increased the tax credit fund by 2%. We passed military retirement exemption. Social Security, halfway to the wall, we got that done. Corporate income tax. So we checked a lot of boxes there. We also provided $100 million as it relates to the prison, $15 million for prison reform. Rainy Day Fund was also increased with an additional allocation of $100 million, plus all of the dollars that flowed in due to stimulus. Healthcare Cash Fund was also stabilized as it needed to be for sustainability. We did 2% provider rates. With that, appropriations over a 2-year period was increased by 2%. 2%. That's what we left. And we left $27 million on the floor. But if you look at the fact that the second year of the biennium actually was up 3.3%. We used some CARES Act money. We used some other stimulus money, obviously, in the first part, which was available to us to hold down the budgetary increases. So in any event, I want to go back and talk about what you have in front of you. It looks like everybody's received this exhibit. What we're talking about here is line items on the general fund. And if you look at the middle, bill number 1011 is the one we're talking about. And the first part is general funds and the impact on general funds. Most of it, if not all, is provider rates. We will talk about a future capital HVAC number that the appropriations has recommended to be upped. But the other part is, of course, cash funds, and they relate to transfers and appropriation of cash funds. And then, of course, the Fed funds at the bottom, lines 13 through 15, really are associated with the Fed also contributes to the provider rates. So if we do 26 million, the Fed contributes under their formula a certain amount toward the provider rates. So in the case of, for an example, just nursing home facilities, we did 26 million is what we recommended, 15%. With the associated 34 million of Fed money, that brought us to 15% reimbursement for provider rates or increase in provider rates. So that's how you can follow it. Breaks down all of the pages that they're talking about into provider rates. But let me go through once again. You know, the governor has indicated that we are excessive at the 5.7% increase. However, as I read to you before, the recommendation includes additional appropriations to agencies to reflect the historic union agreement negotiated to address critical staffing challenges and unanticipated labor market changes. Nebraska experienced historic low unemployment, and the recommendation addresses the state need to adapt to increasing labor market competition, to recruit and retain, and to drive effective, efficient, and customer services. As you saw in this, 20% increases in some, 30% increases in some dollar increases, that will be 20 to 30%. And I did green light that because I thought it was needed. And for an example, that 30% increase for staffing at the Vets Home in Kearney, suddenly now we have enough staff to fully accommodate patient loads in Kearney. Imagine that. But where did those people come from? This is an existing pool of labor. All of a sudden came there, came to the nursing home in Scotts Bluff, came to the DD facility in Beatrice. Where do you think those folks came from? And so when we entered this session and we talked in appropriations, I said, we're going to do one thing, and we're not going to load up the general funds because we knew taxes were an important part of this. We knew it was a priority for a lot of us. That vote tells you it's a priority. But the first thing we take care of is provider rates. I didn't do 15% just willy-nilly. It's only halfway there, folks. 15% is not 30%. It's not 20%. It's 15%. And it's a base increase of 15%, okay? The other part of that strategy rests in ARPA, and that's that $47.5 million. It looks like a big number. Break it down. It is over a 3-year period of time. We're going to do $20 million, not in base increase. This is premium pay. Premium pay is for retainage bonuses and attracting a staff of folks. You got to restaff. I'm sitting out there with nursing homes right now that are depleted relative to their census, and they can't build the census back because they've lost employees. They've lost the employees. They've either retired or left the industry, but they're sucked down right now to where the revenue is not flowing and they're not in a break-even situation, and they are closing. Look at Mullen, look at Ballantyne, look at Arapahoe, look over in Senator Albright's district. That happens. DD, 35% vacancies. You got to fund the base, the people who need it in the base element of this thing. So anyhow, the governor acknowledges inflation. The governor acknowledges the fact that we have a COVID situation. So did appropriations, and so did we recommend it, and so did we pass that budget. And I will tell you this, that every computation I did, and the governor knows this, every computation I did as it relates to provider rates and as it relates to taxes included the 15% provider rates. Folks, if you look at the green sheets and you look at the 4% and the 3.7% of additional cost, and you pull that all forward, provider rates are in there at 15%, plus some increases in it. His 62 million, which, oh, by the way, did I tell you that? 1.3%, we added 1.1%. Everything, every computation, every stress test, every pull forward, every computation, all the safeguards that we looked at as it relates to taxes, provider rates were in there at the 15%. The Appropriations Committee finished their recommendations, our recommendations, $450 million. We brought $453 million. It makes everything pull forward. We use a zero computation for growth. We actually accommodated the governor once again by changing our green sheets. So people can look at what zero growth means in out years and as it relates to taxes so that we fiscally understand what's happening. Provider rates at 15% are in there. This is a no-brainer.
1 minute.
The second thing, obviously, is the future piece of this thing, and I think the executive committee weighed in on this. The executive committee also agrees with the appropriations committee. We have inflation that's hit our HVAC program, and obviously, the governor wants to pull that back, stay with the same number, make the changes as it relates to this construction project. Appropriations said no. We're going to build this according to the original specs. We're not going to take shortcuts. We're not going to do that. And that's what the 14 million is about. And of course, the cash, if you draw a line between some of these cash, the recreation trails obviously is an appropriation, and the money actually comes from the cash reserve.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Stinner. A number of senators in the speaking queue. Before we get to the speaking queue on Senator Stinner's motion, let me announce that while the legislature is in session of capable transacting business, I propose to sign or hereby sign Legislative Bill 873. Now to debate on Senator Stinner's motion. Speaker Hilgers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of this motion to override, and I'm not going to bury the lead. I rise in support of all three of the motions that we're going to have this morning, and I would encourage you, as I have over the last couple of days, to join me in voting green on this particular motion overriding the veto. I want to make a couple of points. First, I want to give a tremendous amount of credit to our Appropriations Committee. Senator Stinner, over the last 6 years, and his team have really done an incredible job. Senator Urban, Senator Clements, Senator Wishart, Senator McDonald, Senator Vargas, Senator Hilkeman. They've done an amazing job working together in difficult times, my first year, as well as times like this, which are unique in its own way. And the reason why we have the opportunity to do two things this year, which is, I think, the biggest tax cut in state history, which we just passed this morning, as well as significant investments on priorities for Nebraskans, like the provider rates, like the other things that are in the budget, like some of the things that are in these vetoes, is because of the fiscal discipline and the prioritization that committee displayed over the last 6 years. Whenever I have an opportunity on the mic or even outside of the building, I always try to make a point that I think we have the best appropriations committee that the state has had in the last 30 or 40 years. And we wouldn't be in a position today to have this kind of a conversation if it wasn't for the work that they did. So with that as a background, I can't do any better than Senator Stinner can. I'm going to yield him the rest of my time here in a second in really making the case for why these are important, why these spending proposals are important for the state, they're important for providers, and we're going to go through them all, and I'm going to give him whatever time he needs to articulate it. But I just want to say, when I read the governor's veto letter, one of the points that resonated with me was making sure that we have enough money for tax cuts as well as accommodating the spending. And at the end of the day, colleagues, if we override these vetoes with the tax package, we will have done something pretty incredible. We will have funded our priorities in a very significant way, thanks to the Appropriations Committee. We will have been able to pass the largest tax cut in state history, thanks to a whole number of individuals. And on top of that, we will have, I think, about $1.3 billion cash reserve. Now, whether you think that's too high or too low, it is undeniable that that is a significant achievement. That is a significant trifecta that I can't say we've had in the last 10 or 20 years, if ever. And that a large portion of that, of the thanks and the credit, goes to the Appropriations Committee, as well as the Revenue Committee, and all the work of so many to be able to get those across. And so I'm going to yield my time to Senator Stinner, but please, I'm urging you to vote green on this motion, as well as the motions on 1012 and 1213. I'd yield the remainder of my time to Senator Stinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Stinner, 2 minutes, 15.
Thank you, Speaker Hilgers. I want to reiterate what we're trying to do in provider rates, what the strategy is, and you need to understand 15% doesn't get you to 30%. Do the 30% times $13 an hour. 30% is $390. It gets you to what? $1690. We're actually looking at that 18 to 19 to stabilize the cash and retain the wage and retain people. So we're only halfway there with what we've done on the base. What we're trying to do with the ARPA is to stage it, get $20 million out in the first year to these individual providers, and with the understanding that this is not base pay. So you stage it over a 3-year period of time, 20, 15, 12 and a half. And you start to stair step up the base so that you don't have a cliff effect at the end. Provider rates, nursing homes, DD, all of those that have huge amounts of vacancies, they need to be able to have time to put together a staff. And once you put together a staff, then you can take on business. Once you take on more business, the cash flow starts to solidify. And certainly then the nursing homes are more sustainable. That was 1 minute.
That was 1 minute.
As I related, actually, the first 6 points, HVAC's in there, but on providers, the lines 13 to 15 goes right with it. That's the Fed reimbursement for that. That brings that particular, those combinations of general funds and Fed funds actually add to the 15%. The other ones, obviously, the skilled labor and community corrections. The governor indicates that should go back to build. No, it shouldn't. We pulled that out. We pulled that out, folks. Senator Wayne beat on the table and said, we're not going to do this. We need something for reforms. That's the $15 million that we set aside for reforms. We found 2 different programs that are all about reforms. That's what we do here. We look for programs that will satisfy some of the goals that we have, and this is the appropriations that we put together for those 2 programs.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Stinner. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I first want to thank Chairman Stinner and the Appropriations Committee for their diligent efforts regarding the budget bills and the ARPA bills, directing dollars, needed dollars to priority areas. And I really want to commend them on their work, what they've done, what they put together here. And I've said all along, I'm going to support a package of tax cuts, the budget bills, the ARPA bills. It really, that combination really is a trifecta win for all Nebraskans. So I will support the override motion on this bill and the following bills. And again, I want to thank Chairman Stinner and the Appropriations Committee for what they've done. Like I said, I'm going to support the override motion, this and the following override motions. I would encourage you to do as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. You know, I've sat here for 6 years and listened to the rhetoric about tax cuts. And the question I have, what is a tax cut? What does that actually mean? I don't have a clue. Are we saying we reduce taxes? Is that what we're saying? Or is it we've decreased the amount of increase? I, for one, believe the last definition is correct. We didn't make any tax cuts. Taxes are continuing to go up. But what we did do is we put a Band-Aid on it so that it wouldn't go up as much as it would have if we hadn't done something. And that last bill that we just passed will mean little of anything to anybody. But it's a tax cut, right? So in government, when you ask for a 10% increase in spending, and then you decide that in all honesty, that's too much, and you cut it back to 5 and you call it a cut. It's an increase. So all you out there listening this morning, don't run to the bank. Don't start spending your savings from the tax cuts that we pass, because we haven't done any. But you may not pay any more or slightly more, like 1107 did for me. So what we have done with this budget is we have made it more difficult for private business to compete with government, because we have increased the compensation and other things. And you heard it stated that the vote came out on a 1011 and 1012 was 9-0 and 1013 was 8-1. So I was part of the 9-0 on the first two, but I was the one on the last one. And so I thought about this yesterday when we got the veto override notice, or the day before. We may not be in this position with overrides had we had the opportunity to make amendments and adjustments to the budget bills when they were up for discussion. But we were not afforded that opportunity because Senator Lathrop filibustered them every time and had amendments in place that avoided us from making adjustments. And I believe Senator Linehan would agree with me, there would have been adjustments made to these bills. And I don't know if it would have prevented an override or not, but it would have went a long ways to helping. And so when you think about what happened when we're supposed to be discussing the budget, we never had the opportunity. And so we sat here and listened to a filibuster on these budget bills for 50 hours about LB 920. LB 920 is no longer. And we have what we have on the budget bills because we allowed that to go on. And so there are ramifications for what we do here. And wasting those 50 some hours brought us to this point.
1 minute.
You know, sometimes when you stand up and say these things, it's like the elephant in the room. But I'm here to tell you that's the truth. That's what happened. And that's why we're here. So deal with it as you may. But I want you out there listening, private business and industry that are trying to hire people, what we're doing here today is going to make your job more difficult. And so what we do in these budgets, we put things in there that each one of us believes is very necessary for our districts. And it forces us to vote for things that probably aren't good decisions, but we have to do it anyway. And so do as you will, vote as you want. But remember, what we have done in this budget this year is we have increased the spending going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Redmond. Senator Arch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the motion on the floor to override, and I want to talk specifically about the rates and where I am on the rates for providers. I appreciate the work that was done by Senator Stinner, the Appropriations Committee. We're in a situation where these rates are critical to the providers. The state obviously recognized it. Senator Stinner mentioned that. 24/7 staff, 30% increase. The state has recognized that. We need to recognize that with the private providers. If we don't recognize that, my concern is, of course, that we're going to see the private providers gradually drop out, not able to sustain, not able to, even with private funds, not able to continue to provide those services. And then we'll be faced with a situation where the state needs to provide all of those services. And I think that the majority of this body would say that's not a good idea. So that is something that we need to support. I do support the 15% increase. We have heard multiple testimonies of, in case of the developmental disability providers, 30% vacancies. They need these dollars to stay in it. The other concern that I expressed previously at another stage of this debate was the intention of the legislature that these are going to rate increases. These aren't going to salary increases. As when the state raises salaries, they can put it specifically to salaries, but in this case, we're putting it to rates. And to make sure that the dollars that we put to rates are then given to staff, that it goes to the staff so that they can recruit, retain staff for the provision of those services. So I had an amendment actually drafted, ready to put on it with intent language of the legislature regarding this. But I've had numerous conversations with various associations and providers assuring me that in all of this, and I'm fully aware, in all of this, all of these service providers, you're running anywhere between 65 to as high as 80% of your costs being staff costs. So necessarily these will go to providers. Now, we don't want to get in the business of saying, well, it should be so much per hour in Scottsbluff, so much per hour in Omaha, so much per hour in Norfolk, and so forth. So we are putting it into the rates as a simple increase, but I believe that this will accomplish the intent of the legislature. Now, the future is unknown. We know that there's serious wage inflation. We have built into our systems in HHS rate studies. In most cases where we periodically conduct rate studies and costs and analyze that, we'll see that better. We'll see that clearer in future years. But for now, we believe that this 15% is appropriate. And so I stand in support of the motion and believe that we need to continue. We need to forward this and make sure that those rates are appropriate for the wage inflation that we're seeing right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Arch. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to support the override attempt here, but I am disappointed that we put things in here that are unrelated to the nursing home provider rates or the provider rates that we've been talking about. And we lumped other things in there, and I hope that they don't jeopardize the intent of what we're after, and that's increasing provider rates. But when you throw in the middle income workforce housing and the recreational trails, and you look at $24 million there that should not have been included in this override attempt, I am saying that I think that was inappropriate and it's wrong. We wanted to address the provider rates, but this is how politics work. We throw junk in there that doesn't belong there, and we know we all have to vote for it. And I said I would vote for the provider rates, so I will vote for this. But I'm disappointed we threw this other stuff in there. One of the things I think we have to address longer term, and that this legislature is going to have to address, is we have provided so much over-regulation of nursing homes that we are driving the cost up to where people cannot afford to go to nursing homes. The complaint we heard when we were investigating some of the nursing homes a few years ago is that people were waiting until they were almost near death to get into the nursing home, and then we were expected to turn them around and keep them alive. And I think the average life expectancy at that time in the nursing home was around 9 months. But we have driven up the cost. We have driven down the service by not providing enough dollars. We've driven down that service that people don't want to go to the nursing home until they absolutely have to. And I think that's a disservice to the elderly. I think they should be able to go there and enjoy themselves for a few years if they choose. But I think we have driven down the service level in there by not providing enough revenue to fund them. That service has gone down in some areas. And I know there's some great nursing homes out there. I've been to them. But there are others out here who have not been able to provide the service because the dollars just aren't there to make that happen. Part of it's because of some of the national ownership, the out-of-state ownership of these nursing homes. They are just looking at a profit. They're sucking the money out of there. They're using and milking the Medicaid system and then leaving the nursing home in a shambles, and they close them up and go into bankruptcy. So unless we address some of those problems in the future, this isn't going to help for long. But again, we have taken it to where people don't want to go to the nursing home. They want to stay in their home. And when they do get there, they are so far drawn down from being at home and not being able to take care of themselves that they don't last very long. And that makes the turnover in the nursing homes longer or shorter or quicker. And it makes it harder for them to stay financially stable when those rooms are empty at times and they're waiting for Medicaid to clear them so those beds can be used again. So we have got a lot of work to do, I think, on some of the regulations that involve nursing homes. And we have overreacted, I think, at times in the regulation. There's more people pushing paper and keeping files and that kind of thing versus patient care. And you look at the staffing of a nursing home, and most of them are in the paperwork department versus taking care of patients. And I think that's where we have lost our direction in some of the nursing homes. But with that, I will support this override, and still disappointed we threw this other junk in there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Geisblake has recognized some guests today. We have with us 47 eighth graders from St. Peter's Catholic School in Lincoln, Nebraska. Those students are with us in the North Balcony. Students, please rise. We can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing debate. Senator Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to just say that I really applaud the governor for the work that he's done over the years that he's been here. He's made a remarkable difference in the state of Nebraska, and he's been a fiscal conservative, and I think we see the results of that now. However, I would have to also tell you that in looking at this particular bill and the situation here with the veto overrides, I cannot support, I will support the override in this case because the provider rates are so critically important. I fully concur with what Senator Friesen just said. I would mirror his remarks in terms of the crisis that we have in our nursing homes, particularly in rural Nebraska. We've already lost one in the 42nd district up in Mullen. That will be sorely missed in that community, and there will be more as time goes on. These provider rates are critically important. I concur with Senator Friesen. There are other things that I would have supported cutting out, but provider rates aren't one of them. We critically need that, and so I will be a yes vote in the override simply because we need that. I would also tell you that I want to applaud Senator Stenner and the Appropriations Committee and everyone in this body who voted for 873. This is a critical tax reduction that had to occur. I'm so pleased that we are giving the accelerated reduction in property tax or in Social Security taxes from an income tax standpoint. Our seniors need that. That will be also supportive to helping our seniors across the state. But in the case of this bill, I will be voting yes on the veto override simply because provider rates are critically important. And again, I applaud the committee for making that increase. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Jacobson. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in support of the motion to override. And I also want to thank Senator Stenner and the entire committee worked so hard on this. Kudos to the Appropriations Committee. I'm in great appreciation for all the work that you have done. And I yield the rest of my time to Senator Stenner.
Senator Stenner, you've been yielded 4 minutes 30.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Actually, I saw that Senator Sanders is last in the queue, so concluding comments, I've tried to explain on the provider rates the importance of that. I think everybody understands that. Middle income housing for workforce was one that I hadn't really kind of elaborated on. We pulled some of that out of ARPA because ARPA was very restrictive as to uses. This gives more permanency to the middle income workforce as it relates to Omaha and Lincoln. So that's why you see that restored back. And with that, I would ask you for your green vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Stenner. Members, you heard the discussion on the motion to override the governor's veto. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
Voting aye. Sirs Aguilar, Arch, Blood, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breezy, Kavanaugh, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregert, Ben Hanson, Matt Hanson, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McCollister, McDonald, McKinney, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansian, Brooks, Sanders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Sirs Albright, Halloran, and Lowe. Not voting, Sirs Bostar, Flood, Day, and Pauls. 42 ayes, 3 nays, 2 present not voting, 2 excused not voting, Mr. President.
The motion is successful. Next motion, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, the next motion with respect to Legislative Bill 1012 is offered by Senator Stinner and the Appropriations Committee. It would move to override the governor's line item veto of Section 28, transfer of funds from prison overcrowding contingency fund to the Vocational and Life Skills Programming Fund.
Senator Stinner, you recognized to open your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, this bill, if you follow down, is 1012, listed in the bill number. There's only 2 items in that, and one's prison overcrowding contingency fund. And as you see, there's a $5 million appropriation for this year, and it's a $15 million fund. So there is language that says our intent, we can't appropriate into the future or past the biennium. Our intent is to use this $10 million to support the 2 programs, skilled labor trades mentoring and community corrections program. Those are 2 programs I think that will help prison overcrowding. If you remember back last session, we took $15 million out of the prison allocation, not the appropriation, the allocation to set up some prison overcrowding reforms. So in any event, that's the only one we did not, as a committee, I will say this, did not recommend line 21, which is restoring the governor's emergency cash fund. We will leave that in available for the governor in his emergency fund. Apparently the hospitals and temporary hospitals, there's a payable out there that needs to be utilized for. And with that, I ask you to vote green. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Stinner. Debate is now open on the motion. I see no one wishing to speak. Senator Stinner, you recognize clearly. Waves closed, and the question for the body is the motion to override the governor's veto. Motion 218. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
Voting aye. Senators Arch, Blood, Bostar, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Michaela Cavanaugh, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Flood, Geis, Gregert, Ben Hanson, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McCollister, McKinney, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansian, Brooks, Sanders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, Senators Albright, Friesen, and Lowe. Senator McDonald voting yes. Senator Kavanaugh voting yes. Senator Aguilar voting yes. Senator Walls voting yes. 42 ayes, 3 nays, 1 present not voting, 3 excused not voting, Mr. President.
The motion is adopted. Final motion, please.
Mr. President, with respect to Legislative Bill 1013, Senator Stinner and the Appropriations Committee would move that the bill become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor.
Senator Stinner, you recognize to open your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, these are the last 2 lines, 22 and 23, Trail Development and Maintenance Fund be restored back to the original amount recommended and passed by this legislature. The 20 million, as I've talked about, middle income workforce, this is where we are getting the money to appropriate for that particular category. As I said, It was in the ARPA. The ARPA is very restricted. There's like 6 different uses. It's more in line with sewers, water, demolition, preparation of sites, clearing title, those types of things, where this actually has the effect of more permanency as it relates to a revolving fund and helping to actually build properties. So it's important that we pass this. And with that, I would recommend a green vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Stinner. Debate on the motion, Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is the one that I voted no on. This has the trail and the $20 million for workforce housing, and it's not a secret to anyone here, nor anyone watching at home. I am opposed to the government building housing. That is foreign to me, and I don't find it any place in our charge anywhere in the Constitution or any place else that we should build a house. So therefore, I voted no. The second issue is a trail. They're building 8 miles of trail, 8 miles, for $8.3 million. $8.3 million for a trail. When they first announced that they were going to expand the highway by my house, the Heartland Expressway was going to be converted into a 4-lane road by my house. And the estimate was it would cost $1 million a mile, $1 million to build a road. Now, the road that goes by my house is 8 miles long. It's a link between 2 highways, 26 and 385. And it's approximately 8 miles long. That's $8 million to build a highway, 8 miles. But we're going to give them $8 million to build a trail for 8 miles, a trail. Trail's not paved, doesn't have any need for having pavement of any kind, maybe a bridge or two. It's $8.3 million. I don't know what it costs to move dirt, but I can tell you what, it doesn't cost $8.3 million. The project on the Heartland Expressway in my district, south of Alliance, Nebraska, for 20 some miles, the dirt work, listen to this, the dirt work to move the dirt on that 4-lane highway was $5.3 million. 5.3 to move the dirt on 20 miles of highway. And there was a lot of dirt to move because it went through hills. And you're going to tell me it's going to cost $8.3 million to build a trail for 8 miles. But you need to remember, Game and Parks is involved, okay? So that may be part of the problem. But I encourage you to vote no on the override on 1013. No is the correct vote here. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Erdman. I see no other members wishing to speak. Senator Stinner waives closing the question for the body adoption of his motion 219 to override the governor. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
Voting aye. Senators Aguilar, Archblood, Bostar, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Flood, Geist, Gregor, Ben Hansen, Hildress, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McCollister, McDonald, McKinney, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansian, Brooks, Sanders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Senators Albright, Erdman, Friesen, Hollard, and Lowe. Not voting, Senators Day, Matt Hansen, and Pauls. 41 ayes, 5 nays, 3 excused, not voting, Mr. President.
The motion is successful. Members, we're moving into final reading again. Pursuant to the rules, I'll ask you please to all be at your desks for final reading.
Carol. That's the first, right? Okay. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Clerk, you're recognized.
Mr. President, with respect to 1014, I do have a series of pending amendments that were carried over. Senator Kavanaugh, Michaela Kavanaugh, a bracket motion, Senator MO 200. I understand you wish to withdraw that. Thank you. The next, Senator Linehan, I had an amendment from you, Floor Amendment 192, a note to withdraw, Senator. Thank you. Senator Moorfield, AM 2373, wish to withdraw, Senator. Thank you. Senator Wayne, motion 153, which was to indefinitely postpone. Thank you, Senator. Then Senator Linehan, I had a series of amendments, 116, 17, withdraw all those. Thank you. Senator Wayne, AM 2516, again, a similar note. Senator Geist, AM 2498. Senator, you want to withdraw that? Thank you. Senator John Kavanaugh, 2488, withdraw. Thank you. Senator Wayne, 2517, I have a note to withdraw. Thank you. Senator Friesen, this is a First Amendment you filed, Senator. It's AM 2550. I don't think, if I understand it, I think you want your latter one, Senator.
No, I do not want to withdraw that one.
Oh, okay. Mr. President, Senator Friesen would move to return legislative bill 1014 to select file for specific amendment AM 2550.
Senator Friesen, recognized to open your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this amendment, we're going to talk about it a little bit, but this is, I do believe this is the one where it talks about the funding that goes to the Lincoln water system. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about just what we've been doing the past couple of days and why we got to where we're at today with all of the different filibusters and the time wasting and the different issues we've tried to address and some of the overrides that we've done. And one of them I just want to spend some time on, and this is an opportune moment to talk about the rental assistance override that we had. I think it was just yesterday. And if you read the Lincoln Journal Star this morning, they had a story about already the woman who was charged with a felony, defrauding the government of more than $26,000 in emergency rental assistance. In the way that those funds were distributed, this doesn't surprise. And again, it goes back to when I talked about the override and why I didn't support it. In the Lincoln and Omaha areas, the distribution model was completely different than what we used in rural Nebraska. And they distributed the money pretty well, just come in, check a few boxes, we'll write you a check the way it looks at me. Now they're going to start going through those and finding out which ones are fraud and which ones are not. And in the end, the state of Nebraska picks up the tab. This is what we're doing here this year. We're shoveling money out the door as fast as we can, saying we're helping people, while at the same time I'm getting a text from an employer that says he's finally getting some applications for employment. People are running out of money. They're finally having to come back to work. He's had more applications in the last 30 days than he's had in the last 2 years. When we go through this, and I know I talked about this when we were talking about the override, in Lincoln and Omaha, they had the ability to shovel probably around $200 million out the door. And there's going to be more fraud like this. Everyone knows it. And you're going to catch maybe 10% of it. It really jumped the economy here. It boosted the economy in Lincoln and Omaha because that money got spent and you're never going to get it back. And it's just money sent out the door. I hope it went to a good cause. But the way it sounds and the way it looks here, this here wasn't even a rental. It was totally fabricated. They owned the house. They weren't renting it. This is the system that was devised in Omaha and Lincoln. And then we're supposed to trust the nonprofits to do it right. Trust, but in the end, the state makes up that loss. And in rural Nebraska, we had to go through the portal, where even if it was a legitimate claim, it was difficult to access. If you didn't have access to a computer, you had to go to a library. You had to start filing your claim, and then it would ask you for my documentation, so you'd have to go home and get it. You'd come back, you'd start filling out the application again. They'd ask you for something else. You'd have to go home. This is how we applied for the rental assistance. That's why we have $30 million left. And you took $80 million and distributed it in Lincoln and Omaha. And now we're supposed to help you fund your water system. This is why we have this urban-rural split, maybe. It's always a different system. It's a different set of standards we operate under. We don't have people who have made hundreds of millions or billions of dollars living in rural Nebraska to be the philanthropists who put their names on buildings. In rural Nebraska, we work. And we donate, and we build our communities. We find our own water sources. And yet, when it comes to the rental assistance, we run through this portal that if everybody would have run through that portal, maybe we would have only needed a total of $100 million. Maybe we've wasted $200 million. We were trying to help those who truly needed it. Instead, we created a program for fraud where they're going to have to go and dig through it now and spend the next 3 years trying to find out who got the money. But that's water under the bridge, so to speak. So it's an interesting read, the article, and how they fabricated documents, went through the whole process and got $26,040 back in June of 21. And now we're just starting to find all this. And there's going to be a lot more of it the way it sounds. And again, the state of Nebraska will pick up that tab. So this amendment here, what it does is take the $20 million, I believe, that's for finding Lincoln a new source of water, and it takes it and puts it into the reverse osmosis systems for communities or rural water users that might need some assistance with cleaning up their drinking water, which we don't monitor as heavily. We can get it tested, but when you have your own water system, you are responsible for testing your water. And people do send in samples and get them tested. But there are some issues in some areas, and we talked about the area around the Alt-End ethanol plant. Maybe those people need reverse osmosis drinking water systems to protect their drinking water. And we're not helping them find a new source of water. They're going to find their own. With that, I'm open to some discussion on this, and we'll see once if we want to carry it any further. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Debate on the motion, Senator Flood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I reject the idea that this is some sole benefit for the city of Lincoln. When I was here before in the legislature, we went through a pretty serious drought in 2011. And I know that because I was getting calls from residential users who were saying, I can't get water. And ag irrigators were trying to keep pumping irrigation, and well drillers were out trying to go deeper to find the water. And we were this close to shutting off. Well, we did. We had all sorts of phase outs of irrigation. Human water drinking consumption comes before anything else. And I remember the conversation that we had at that time. We were talking about appropriated and fully appropriated. We went through a whole series of issues as it relates to the Republican River Basin, the Platte River Basin, and everything that comes from it. Irrigators have gone through a lot of changes and a lot of regulation in the last 15 years. Where does the Elkhorn River meet the Platte? Well, it does. The Elkhorn River flows into the Platte, which flows into the Missouri. All of that's hydrologically connected. Lincoln is a very large city. It needs a second water source. And if it has a second water source, it provides less risk for irrigators in the region. You can draw a line around Lancaster County, you can draw a line around Lincoln, but we're all connected. Just like the surface water is connected to the groundwater, and the groundwater is connected to the surface water. This is something that I think sets the table, not just for the city of Lincoln, but the region, because the city of Lincoln is looking at building a regional water system in southeast Nebraska. And it's likely that their second water source options are east of Lincoln, maybe even all the way to the Missouri River. That's good news long-term for the citizens of Lincoln. That's good news for the irrigators in the Lincoln area. And that's good news for anybody along the Platte River. And ultimately, it's good news for people in Northeast Nebraska. I've been at meetings with 300 or 400 irrigators when they're being told that they're going to have to put meters on their wells. Senator Breezy's probably been at a few of those meetings. Corn growers pack the room at the NRD meeting. And every single time somebody stands up and says, if we don't deliver enough water in these rivers to our state's two largest cities, we will see shutdowns up and down the basin. This is reasonable, it's responsible, it's forward-thinking, it addresses a concern that's long-term, and in a legislature this year that has endorsed the idea of a lake between Omaha and Lincoln, it's endorsed the idea of improvements at Niobrara, Lake McConaughey. Why wouldn't we do this? This is for drinking water for our state's second largest city. It's for a region, it's for the concept of a regional water system, and I think Senator Gregor would agree, it's good for irrigators. It's good for agriculture. Let's be proactive. No one wants to get the call when they're an elected office holder that we are going to start shutting down irrigation. We're going to start restricting water use, and ultimately our drinking water is unsafe. There's another issue here too that I think needs to be addressed, and that is the flooding that impacted Lincoln in 2019 when their wells and everything was happening. That put a lot of our citizens in this state in a precarious situation as it relates to their drinking water. So I am opposed to what Senator Friesen is doing. I think that this provision in the ARPA bill makes absolute sense. And if we want to be forward thinking and we want to address the issues that we have here, not only at 1 minute, Mr. President, the issues that we have in not just agriculture, but for the city of Lincoln, this needs to stay in there. And the more that we have this rift that sometimes flares up between urban and rural Nebraska, we need to look at how it's connected. Just like our water is hydrologically connected, so are we. This is the right thing to do. I oppose Senator Friesen's amendment strongly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Flood. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's amazing to see where opinions fall when you're running for election to another position. Let me explain to you how this 20 million got here. We were at the end of discussion on the ARPA money that day on a Saturday. We'd been there from noon till about 3:15. And we were about to wrap up. And Senator Wishart drops in this amendment for 20 million for the water source for Lincoln. That was not even a bill that came to appropriations, but it was another bill in another committee. And to my surprise, we passed it. We adopted it. Not all of us, some of us, enough to get it here. So what Senator Friesen is trying to do makes sense. But if you're going to represent the city of Lincoln, or you do represent the city of Lincoln now, you'll be totally opposed to this. Because that's how it works here, is if you can sneak in and drop in something at the last minute, you may be able to move to the front of the line. That's what happened with this $20 million. So there's probably only 3 or 4 people in here listening anyway, but I think the people back home are listening. This ARPA bill and the spending that is in this bill is going to increase our budget significantly. And you don't have to believe me, just watch. Next year, the year after, when the federal money runs out, we will be in a position similar to 17. And then we'll have to make what we call cuts, which we didn't make in 17. We made a few adjustments, but we really didn't cut anything. But I am in support of Senator Friesen's motion. I'm in support of the vote to bring it back for the amendment, and I think he has others. And as I said before, we sometimes make decisions here what's best for us in the position that we're running for. But I'm not running for anything when I'm done here. But I did come here to represent the people of the state of Nebraska, even the people in Lincoln. But Senator Friesen is going to put 20 million into this water treatment, which is not a lot of money when you consider what those treatment facilities cost and the maintenance of them. But it is a beginning. It's a start. And so I'm in favor of 2550, and I would encourage you to be the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Urban. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me clear up a few facts here. Not all surface water is connected to our groundwater. We have had an extensive battle over conjunctive use of surface water and groundwater, and we have done major studies of proposals there that have tried to tie surface water and groundwater together. Most groundwater irrigators are not connected to any surface water whatsoever. In my area, on the upper Big Blue, we have very little connection to the Platte River. It runs about 1.5 miles south of the Platte River, where if you would drill a well over the next 40 years, you may have an impact on the river's flow. So don't connect the two together and say that we're going to restrict groundwater pumping when we run short of water in the Platte River. That's not true. Now, in some cases, that water is connected, but not in all cases. And I will tell you that Lincoln has senior water rights on the Platte River that supersede almost all irrigation rights and allow the city of Lincoln to grow probably double the size it is right now if they exercise those rights, which they would in a heartbeat. We in agriculture know that the highest use for water will be domestic use. We are never going to change that. When a city wants water, they're going to take it. There's nothing we can do to stop it, which we already know as a minority. We already have very little control. And if a municipality ever wants water, most irrigators would actively work to make sure that you will get it, if you can show that it goes to a higher use. But to say that it's connected and you will be able to shut off irrigation water because we're not going to have a second source of water here is not true. Lincoln chose to put a well field where they did. They chose to maybe not look at the engineering and see that flooding might take out their source of water, or they didn't protect it good enough. Now they want an alternate place so that's more protected and want us to pay for it. When the city of Henderson needed water supply, when the city of Hastings needed to redo their water system, they paid for it. They applied for grants if they could. They applied for some federal grants. But if they wanted to clean up their water system, they did. They went through the system instead of through this. And I will say, when we're doing the spending this year, this is one of those bills where everybody got a little piece of the action. We sent money out to everybody, and I hope everybody's happy. I hope everybody's problems are solved for the next 20 years, because we won't have an opportunity to spend money like this for a long time again. We did that this morning. I hope we took that opportunity away for this body to spend this kind of money, and we don't ever have to go through this process here again. When you look at how much pork we've put in our budgets, you will look and we will sound just like the federal government at work. And someday our kids and our grandkids are going to pay all that back. And as interest rates go up, the federal government's debt interest will rise, and we'll wonder why they don't have any money. So I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this yet. I would like some more discussion, and let's see once if we want to help some other water systems out there, if we want to help other cities that are having issues with their water supply, or is it just the big cities that ask for help and get it? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Speaker Hilgers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. I'd oppose the amendment in part, at least, because this is on final reading, and if we have anything to go back to select file, we have to have another layover day. And at this point, we've had a number of these issues. We've had, I don't know how many, well over a dozen, I believe, amendments heard both on general and select file. And so at this stage in the game, I would encourage you to vote no, in part because we need to get this to the governor so that we can stay on schedule. I would yield my time to Senator Flood if he would like it, because I think he was articulating the opposition, if he would like the extra time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Flood, 4 minutes 18, if you care to use it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Speaker Hilgers, and thank you for the, I think, acknowledgement that we're at the point where we have put together something. We've passed a budget. We've considered the veto overrides, and now we're on final reading, talking about taking out a piece of what's in the ARPA budget and having a conversation, which I can appreciate, about water policy. I will tell you, when we went through this whole situation, the Republican River Basin, the upper, the middle, the lower, trying to meet our obligations to the Kansas Tri-State Water Compact, there were a lot of really tense moments. It was uncomfortable, and the things the legislature had to do and the things and the sacrifices that the people in the Republican River Basin had to make were not a good situation. I have supported the canal in the state of Colorado for the same reason I'm opposing this, and that is to make sure we have a water supply that allows our number one industry to thrive while not compromising the health and safety of others. And Senator Friesen's right. The city of Lincoln does have senior water rights. And if they exercise those senior water rights, what happens then? There's a finite amount of water. If the city of Lincoln wanted to exercise those senior surface water rights, junior rights holders can be curtailed and groundwater users can be affected. So in essence, Senator Friesen has made my argument that we are connected. And what is the harm in finding a second water source for the state's second largest city? I was speaking with Senator Breezy earlier before, and he and I were talking about the fact that you can't drill wells like you used to in rural Nebraska. 20 years ago, you didn't have to get a permit for drilling a well. You might have had to get some permit, but it wasn't anything like it is now. Today, those are like golden permits to be able to drill a well and irrigate dry ground suddenly. It's ironic that we'd have a debate about this because, in my opinion, agriculture knows better than anyone how important it is for the city of Omaha and the city of Lincoln, our two largest cities in the state of Nebraska, and Sarpy County, to have a reasonable water supply. You don't want the calls from your constituents when they say, my crop's drying up, I can't irrigate. You also don't want the calls from people that say, we can't take a shower, we don't have any drinking water.
1 minute.
The well driller can't be here for another 3 weeks. That's what happened in 2011, and it was very, very scary. This is forward thinking, it's visionary, it's in sync with what we're doing in the state of Colorado, it's in sync with the Star Wars effort, and it's certainly in the best interest of the state of Nebraska. So I am opposed to Senator Friesen's motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Flood. Senator Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, finally, maybe not the most appropriate time to talk about water, but definitely something that should have been talked about, I suppose, more on LB 925. It's not only about the quantity of water, but the quality of water. And now we're looking at what I tried to bring out in 925 is that we are beyond being proactive. We're in the reactive state of especially the quality of our water. It continues to get worse and worse. And yes, now we can spend millions, and we'll be spending billions before we're all said and done on the treatment of our water because of different chemicals in our water. So I guess where I'm at with this is somebody trying to be proactive, I'm all for. I voted for all the water bills that came across because I know how important this natural resource is to us now and is going to get even more important to us in the future. we need to not figure out ways to how we're going to treat our water after we mistreated it, but how, more importantly, we're going to probably have to look at is how are we going to start conserving our water. In 2011, that's exactly right. What happened with some of the irrigation wells were drawing down the water to where domestic use wasn't even being capable. Some people weren't capable of taking showers. And who's has the authority over that one are our NRDs, our natural resource districts, our 23 natural resource districts that now give out permits to even drill irrigation wells. And not only just to go out there and drill a well in particular NRDs, but you got to be certified along with that well to get those acres to be able to irrigate on. So again, we need to be proactive. I brought up in Creighton, Nebraska in 1991, we built a reverse osmosis for 1,147 people, and it cost us $1.3 million. That's around $1,100 for each man, woman, and child in Creighton, Nebraska. And why did we have to do that? Because of nitrates in our water. And but the city of Creighton, those are the people, and all the other people that are going to have high nitrates are going to be paying for not only buying that reverse osmosis, which will probably cost, 1991 was 1.3 million. So you can imagine in 2022, probably 8 million. And then not only that, it costs $550,000 annually to run that reverse osmosis in Creighton, Nebraska. So that's another $497 I paid just to clean the nitrates out of our water. That's on top of now what I have to pay for the water itself. Water, again, and I can't stress enough that when we're without it, we're going to be, we don't realize the value of that water until we're carrying our own buckets. But we are going to, if we are going to continue to not be proactive and conserve our water and watch the chemicals we put on and end up in our water, millions isn't going to do it. 20 million is like throwing a BB into Lake McConaughey when you're going to be looking at all these reverse osmosis at all the cities. And now, and not only the cities, but even the producers or the individuals that live on the farm and have their own wells, those aren't even regulated. So the only way you're going to know what really is in your water is to take it upon yourself to go and have that water tested. And please do that, because now you're going to need a reverse osmosis on your particular well at your place. And that is going to cost thousands of dollars. So again, there are conservation practices. There are ways that we can do this, and it's not going to turn around overnight. This didn't happen overnight. It's going to take years. But the only thing we're going to be able to use now to protect our people
That's time, Senator.
are.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mr.
Gregor.
President.
Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, good morning, I should say. So I said this to Senator Friesen off the mic. What he's trying to do here is very similar to when you try to stop spending or funding going to the university. You get in front of that university snowball and you're going to get rolled. And so what he has done now is stepped in front of the Eastern Nebraska contingency of representation that Lincoln and the East have. And Senator Friesen, we're going to get rolled on this one. There is not a chance that your amendment will ever get adopted, because there are a significant number of representatives, whether they are elected now to represent Lincoln or up for election for Congress that are going to represent Lincoln, that will be opposed to what you're trying to do. You can have the greatest idea in the world. You can try to protect rural water sources. You can do all those things, which is what your bill does, your amendment does, but it won't reach the finish line. So continue with your discussion, and you'll probably hear more comments from people who are running for elected offices, defend Lincoln's water source. And I guess it should be rightfully so. But as I said earlier, this 20 million got in there at the very last second. Didn't have a hearing in our appropriations committee, came from another committee, but it's for Lincoln. And those people in rural Nebraska that are listening today understand what that all means. They understand it completely. Because you see, we only have 5 senators west of Kearney. And there's more than that in the city of Lincoln. So when Senator Friesen talked about the urban-rural divide, he is very much correct on that. So I'm going to vote for this, and Senator Friesen will probably vote for this, but that'll probably be about it. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Senator Urban. Senator Matt Hansen. He waives the opportunity. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the different things I've heard here. And when we talk about the Republican River Basin and the management that happens there, I will point out, I was on the LB 962 Water Task Force that rewrote our entire state water law, and I was a representative of small municipalities at the time. And I was not an irrigator, but a representative of small cities. When we talk about the Republican River Basin, the reason that's such a messed up thing is our Attorney General's office negotiated that settlement in secret without using the NRDs for their experience and their knowledge. And he basically negotiated a lot of our rights away, and I'll still blame him forever for that. That was a mess that probably can never be made up. And those guys down there are paying $10 an acre in an occupation tax to correct that mistake. So when Senator Greger talks about nitrates in our water, the Upper Big Blue NRD had one of the first, I think, in the state water quality areas that were established. I was on that committee when we established it. And what it showed, and the results of all the data we had, is if people followed the University of Nebraska recommendations in the 60s and the 70s and into the early 80s, we were over fertilizing. If you even followed the recommendations of the university, they were telling us more water, more fertilizer, more corn. They were wrong. And as we learned more, as we studied more, as we had more research projects out there, we have now cut our nitrogen use probably in half per bushel. But the results that we saw when we dug test holes clear down through the Vados zone to the water table, even back in I think this was probably in the 1980s when we did this, the late 80s, it showed already that we had a nitrate contamination problem that was going to be coming in the next 20, 30 years. It's here. And it's not what we're doing today. It's what we did in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when we didn't know better and the university made those recommendations and we followed them. We were wrong. But there was 1,200 pounds of nitrogen below the root zone, above the water table, that's heading down to our groundwater. We could stop farming today. We could stop putting on fertilizer, and we're still going to have nitrates that go up into probably that 20 parts per million, 25. All I ask now, I keep telling my NRDs, is show me that I'm contributing to the problem today, and I'll change what I'm doing. But we have changed a lot from the time that those problems occurred. And to say that we're going to be able to fix it by doing certain things is not true. It's just going to take another 20, 30 years to fix this. So I talked to Senator Arch a little bit about what the issue is, but it's a lot bigger than what we're talking about right here. That's not what I'm after. But we, in our area, when we invested in irrigated agriculture back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we're the ones that drove that value of irrigated land up to where it is today. We're the ones that invested in wells and we put our pivots on. We didn't have anybody come do that for us. It wasn't a federal water project that built a system of dams and canals. This is us investing our money, and in return, they raised our taxes
1 minute.
because we increased the value of that property. We invested in that, no one else. And we don't want contaminated water. We drink it just like everybody else. But when you look at cities, and small cities especially, we're asking them to put in water treatment systems where 95% of the water gets flushed down the toilet. There's no reason for that. Unless we change our laws to where you can put on a reverse osmosis system and have clean drinking water from a spigot. But right now, you're required to treat all of the water. And all of that water, 95, probably 98% of it, does not get put into your body. You shower with it, you wash the driveway, you wash your cars, and yet we're treating every gallon of those water. It's not how we should do it because it's costing us millions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Pansy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank Senator Flood for standing up to support Lincoln's water system. I'm with him on every single thing he said. Water is our liquid gold. And as we know, Lincoln is the second largest city. We have to continue to protect our water. We have to conserve and protect the water for our future. To criticize the fact that we've had flooding troubles and that Senator Friesen said, oh gosh, maybe we put the wells in the wrong place, or maybe we had people that didn't know where to place them originally, belies the fact that if we are not proactive right now, $30 million will be a happy pipe dream. Water treatment plant, we're talking about water treatment plant, land acquisition. You know, the hue and cry that the urban senators do not care about the rural senators, it's enough. You don't have to keep saying that. You are creating that divide. We have supported cut after cut of property taxes. Is it enough? I'm sure that many of you don't think it's enough, but we have continued to support property tax cuts for farmers and for people in rural areas. We've supported the income tax cuts. We fought to override on rental assistance, especially to rural areas. And you all decided not to do that. So it's enough to continue to bring in this wedge about rural versus urban. We are working our darndest. If you have an idea, if you don't think that rural Nebraska has clean enough water, then bring us the idea. You haven't brought the idea to us. The fact that Lincoln has come forward and said, we need to do something about our water is not our problem, that they've been foresightful. Yeah, we have a huge population. The state legislature is here. The state university is here. We have all sorts of incredible business opportunities here. We have to have clean water. If you have a problem in rural Nebraska, bring it to us. We'll support your initiatives to clean up the water in the rural areas. You've never brought that issue to us. So I stand against returning to select file, against Senator Friesen's Amendment 2550. We will continue to fight for water everywhere in our state. It is our liquid gold. It's the way we live. It's the way we grow crops. This makes no sense. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Pansy Brooks. Senator Flood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Pansy Brooks. And I would like to ask Senator Gregert a question, if you would yield to
Senator
one.
Gregor, you please.
Certainly.
Senator Gregor, we're having a conversation today about Lincoln and its water supply and the idea of having a secondary water source. I love the comment about, what did you say, a BB in the Lake McConaughey? Is that what you said?
Oh, that's correct. That's just, yes.
Okay, that's good.
Just right now, dumping $20 million into what they're asking for and what they're going to need. As I see it in the future, $20 million isn't going to go anywhere. It's like throwing a BB into Lake McConaughey, the splash you'd make.
But the reality is, it starts the process of answering a question and solving a future problem. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and others in here have raised this about rural Nebraska, Cedar and Knox County have had some water system issues. We've talked about that. And as I recall, earlier this session, we adopted an amendment to a budget bill that did spend some money to try and address some water issues that you're having in your district. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Through the ARPA, and we have, and again, the Appropriations Committee did an outstanding job in my mind. But we spent a lot of money on water, and but we didn't spend a lot of money on the cream of the crop, if you will, the drinking water. I asked for some money, which is going to be a rural water system for drinking water, which is going to cost $36 million. And I settled for, I guess, if you will, and I'm very thankful for it because I believe 7 million is better than no million. But I received less than 20% of the asking cost in that rural water system that Knox Cedar would be putting in, and that's fine.
Right.
But we need to concentrate on drinking water.
I appreciate that, Senator Gregor. And I think it's important to note when the city of Lincoln interest came in, they asked for $200 million for this process to address a secondary water source, and they ended up with $20 million for a city that is growing with 300,000 residents. So my point here is this isn't a zero-sum game. In this ARPA proposal, we have rural interests, we have urban interests, we have a sizable investment into Knox County, Nebraska for Lake McConaughey and the Wygon Marina that takes advantage of water resources. We have the concept of this lake between Omaha and Lincoln, and then we have Lake McConaughey. As I look at the ARPA proposal, I think given the fact that this is a large city and the Appropriations Committee considered a $200 million request, this is modest in comparison to the per capita impact. The other thing I want to say, the senators from Lincoln understand this. Senator Bostar brought this forward. The leadership of the city of Lincoln's paying attention to this. This is one of those issues where we can work together, agriculture and the urban interests, to find a solution to a problem that could get much worse. The last thing I want to talk about as it relates to Lincoln's effort here is that this is not just a city of Lincoln issue. It's a regional water system concept, which means that rural communities in southeast Nebraska will have the opportunity to partner. Think about
1 minute.
some of the smaller communities, especially in southern Lancaster County, as they grow and their schools see more and more students and they have more homes built and more people want to live in close proximity to the city of Lincoln, you're going to see the need for a water system improvement. And we want that growth to be organized, and we want it to be safe for drinking water, and we want those rights protected. So at the end of the day, Senator Friesen is right. Lincoln does have the opportunity with its senior water rights to make a lot of decisions that could impact agriculture. This is a reasonable step forward, and it has my support, and I am going to vote against Senator Friesen's amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator Urban, you recognize your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. A third opportunity already. Okay, thank you. I listened to Senator Pansing Brooks talk about a property tax relief for rural. But I have a question about that, so I want to ask Senator Friesen if he would yield the question.
Senator Fraser, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
Senator Friesen, you heard the comments that Senator Pansing Brooks made about property tax relief for rural. How much of the property tax relief in 1107 went to urban, if you know?
I think if I remember correctly, currently 71% goes to residential commercial properties.
Okay, so then would you say that rural got about 25% of the total, little over, and urban got about 3/4?
Roughly, you can say that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So when we stand up and say there's a urban rural split here, and we keep saying that, well, maybe it's true, because about 3/4 of the property tax relief went to urban. And so it's peculiar that, I guess we can say whatever we want. We don't have to back it up with facts. So with that, I'll yield the rest of my time to Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Senator Urban. Senator Friesman, 3 minutes 30.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the reason I guess I wanted this discussion again is that people say, well, us rural guys should come to you for help, and we'll help you. And if I recall, I've been here 8 years trying to get non-equalized school districts in rural areas some funding. And for 8 years, Lincoln Public Schools and OPS have blocked any efforts to do that. Why would we come here and ask for help? We just do it ourselves. It's like one city administrator out in rural areas said, look, Senator, I don't want to tell you this, but we really don't care anymore what you do in Lincoln. We just work around what you guys do and we make it work for us. So go ahead and pass your laws, do all your political talking, running for higher office, do your campaign speeches, but don't come here and waste our time anymore. We just work around you because you don't help us in rural Nebraska. Thank you for trying. Thank you for going there. But we know nothing's going to happen. When we talk about road issues, and I was chair of Transportation Telecommunications, we got the DOT to come out to a small city. They've been working on a project for 20 years. City administrator says, yeah, well, thanks for bringing them out. They'll plant a few flags. They'll wear their orange jackets. They'll walk around town a little bit. And when you're gone, they'll be gone. That's how our system works. Most people don't even know anything exists past Lincoln. It was too far to drive to go to the State Fair in Grand Island. We have a problem in this state because we keep forgetting about 2/3 of the geography of the area, and you keep saying, well, we've got 2/3 of the population. Yes, and if we keep our tax policy the way it is, you'll continue to grow that ratio. We'll continue to send you less hardworking kids because we're running out of people.
1 minute.
Because our tax code, the way it's been set up for the past 30 years, drives development to Lincoln and Omaha. Follow the money. You look at this year and we're going to spend, I don't know, does it approach $1 billion in Omaha? If you look at LPS and payroll protection money and rent assistance, you add all of that together and it might just equal around $1 billion of aid that we've poured into Omaha. Go look in rural Nebraska and see how much they got. You guys saw schools that got $6,000 in CARES Act money. Small towns that got $46,000, $50,000. Small businesses out there that just went broke, closed up, got very little. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Before proceeding, Senator Gregg, I would like us to recognize some guests today. We have with us 14 students, grades 3 to 5, St. Ledger School in Creighton, Nebraska. Those students are with us in the north balcony. Students, please rise. We can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I don't want to unnecessarily delay this vote. I support LB 1014 and I oppose AM 2550. To talk about supplying Lincoln water is actually an important topic to consider. Senator Flood is correct. There was a drought and Lincoln was for water rationing. It was a very serious situation. But there is a resolution to that problem, and that is bringing the water from MUD, the MUD South Plant. They utilize water from the Mississippi or the Missouri, and so it wouldn't be an issue. Although the Platte West plant gets its water from the Loop and Elkhorn, and the Platte is a pretty undependable source of water for that particular water plant. So there is a resolution, and folks from MUD and the city of Lincoln are working on that, and I hope we can bring an answer to the state and take care of Lincoln's persistent water problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator McAllister. Senator Friesen, you recognize to close on your motion to return to select file.
Thank you, Mr. President. So again, I'll continue on a little bit. You know, the reason we don't come here is we do fix it ourselves when we can. When it gets overwhelming, yes, we'll come here. But when we talk about property tax relief for us out in rural Nebraska, we haven't done any more or any less than we've done for the urban areas. This money went to those who are paying the highest. It was probably the most fair way of distributing the money that we've done. It didn't help rural Nebraska any more than it helped urban areas. The majority of the money went to the urban areas. So don't tell me you helped us with property tax relief, because we haven't done that yet. We've helped everyone. We've done substantial work, but it went everywhere. It did not address agriculture's problem. It did not address the sand hills of the grasslands of the rancher, the cow-calf producer. We didn't address that at all. We ignored it. We don't fund our schools properly yet. We're still 48th in the country of how we do our schools, but we did provide property tax relief. We did some of that this morning. But again, rural Nebraska is used to kind of doing it themselves. But if we keep pushing this idea that everything has to happen in the East, and when we start to say, oh my goodness, you know, the rural areas, we don't have enough people living there. We don't have, our schools are half full and we have to build so many more schools in Lincoln and Omaha. But yet when our tax policy encourages that, that's where we're going to continue to have this problem. Unless you start looking 20, 30 years into the future, we're going to continue to have that problem. I will say that putting some of the nursing facility or the education facilities in Kearney helps a little bit. That's a good small step. But when we keep giving UNL and UNO hundreds of millions of dollars, it overwhelms the little bit that you did in Kearney. When we give $300 million to the next project in Omaha, it makes Kearney's investment insignificant. When we invest in $50 million in amenities at Offutt Air Force Base, when we don't invest in some small rural community in western Nebraska, we don't help the situation for 20 years from now. Our number one industry is still located out there. We can't just shut it down and ignore it. And water will be a tremendous issue to fight over in the future. We are not done by any means. I've always said when the next drought hits, that's when the legislature suddenly gets interested in water again. But when there's flooding flowing down the Platte, we're sure not looking to fix problems of a shortage of water. We are reactive, we are not proactive, and we have no long-range look whatsoever. When you dangle money in front of us, we throw it out there as fast as we can throw it. We don't trust our businesses and our industries to invest money if we just let them keep it. We want to tax everything we can. And when we have excess money here, we find ways to spend it. With that, Mr. President, I'll withdraw my amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
The motion is withdrawn. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Friesen, may I ask, sir, I have a series of other amendments from you. Would you like me to go through them, or are you going to withdraw?
Mr. President, in respect to the speaker in this body, I'll withdraw them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Friesen.
Mr. President, I have nothing further on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before proceeding, members, we are on final reading. Please be at your desks. And while doing so, Senator Moorfeld would like us to recognize 39 fourth and fifth graders from St. Patrick's School in Lincoln. Those students with us in North Balcony. Students, please rise. We welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Members, we're on LB 1014E. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing the reading, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Record, please.
33 ayes, 6 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading has been dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 1014 is a bill by Speaker Hilgers at the request of the governor. It's a bill for an act relating to appropriations. It states intent, it defines terms, it appropriates funds allocated to the state of Nebraska from the federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery fund pursuant to the Federal American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, 42 USC 802 as amended, and declares an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 1014E pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Aguilar, Arch, Blood, Bostar, Boston, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Day, DeBoer, Dorn, Flood, Gregor, Holleran, Ben Hansen, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hunt, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Lowe, McCollister, McDonald, McKinney, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy Brooks, Sanders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, Senators Albright, Clements, Erdman, Friesen. Not voting, Senators Geis, Matt Hansen, Hughes, Linehan, and Pauls. 40 ayes, 4 nays, 4 present, not voting, 1 excused, not voting, Mr. President.
LB 1014E passes with the emergency clause attached. Before proceeding to the next bill on final reading, while the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign the 3 certificates that read that LBs 1011, 1012, and 1013, having been returned by the governor with his objection thereto, and after reconsideration, having passed the legislature by the constitutional majority, have all now become law the 7th day of April, 2022. Next bill on final reading, Mr. Clerk.
Enroll Bill 1084, introduced by the Business Labor Commission, signed by the member of Bill Vernacular, claims against the state groups claim following claims against state filed with the recommended discipline state claims board and appeal by the claimant are hereby disproved. 7,408 claim in 2020 and 20 hours is saved for Wagner Dion, that's his state, Spivey, Nebraska. 6,000 claim number 221, 2029, 2030 against state for made claim the cotton by and through her attorney Jeffrey Wagner, Bellevue, Nebraska 618123.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 1084 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
Voting aye. Senators Aguilar, Albright, Arch, Blood, Bostar, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Clements, Day, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Flood, Friesen, Grigert, Holler, and Hanson, Hilgers, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, McKinney, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Saunders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senators Geist and Pauls. 47 ayes, no nays, one present not voting, one excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 1084 passes. Next bill, please.
Bill 1083, and it's by Business Labor Agreement, bill for not relating claims against the state appropriate funds with payment of certain claims, provided payment claims, authorized agencies to write off certain claims, prescribed and declaring marriage. Section 1. Following sums of money as may be required as according to settle the state claims or approved at the district court. 45 million for general state and Brady Sheriff for the trust account that have Sherry Brown Sheriff of the laws. Gave claim against state against the state of Nebraska and Harry out of the general fund. Total appropriate claims of the state shall fund source $474,000. Following claim fund funds the same may be required to be hereby appropriated for the general fund for against the funds including compensated committee certified by the Attorney General. 100,000 workers compensated following Michael David Gray, Chantilly Norris, and days of workers compensated for Billy Back Travis, Astor, Brown, Denver, Spiegel, Disney Law Firm, PC, Fallbrook, Lincoln, Nebraska. Claim against the second shall be paid through the program 503 ages total fund source 000. Total 429,000. There's a by road records of fund to authorize. And there's say here warrants upon the funds of state treasurer amounts set to respective advisors of such assigns certain appropriate claims filed by these beneficiaries following claims of private state against claims service right off certain accounts. State claims worth reviewed 5,007 request number Board of Education 1404 games of park submissions 37,871 state treasurer 327 560 Department of Transportation 530 request number of the Nebraska Public Service Commission. Request number is by the Department of Labor, 333 is made by the Department of Labor, 2,573 request number by the Department of Health and Human Services. Section 5, since an emergency exists, this act takes effect and passed and approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 1083E pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye, and those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
Voting aye. Mr. Aguilar, Albright, Arch, Blood, Bostar, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Clements, Day, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Flood, Friesen, Grigert, Holler, and Hanson, Hilgers, Hickman, Hughes, Jacobson, Coulterman, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, McKinney, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Saunders, Slama, Stinner, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senators Geist, Hunt, and Pauls. 46 ayes, no nays, 2 present not voting, 1 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 1083E passes with the emergency clause attached. Next bill, please.
Mr. President, with respect to 917, I had, first of all, a motion from Senator Matt Hansen, but I understand, Senator, you wish to withdraw. Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to return the bill for Amendment 2587.
Senator Wayne, recognize you.
Thank you,
Motion
Mr. President.
to return the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a weird request because the business community actually contacted me who hire a lot of these individuals and said 25% is too much. Believe it or not, they said they don't want that much money. It's kind of odd. So we lowered the 10% of the wages of the individual. They said that seems fair and reasonable, but they called me and contacted me. So rather than pass a bill that I think could cause harm, we're going to return it back to lower the tax credit from 25% of the wage to 10% of the wage. And recall, it's a small amount. It's only those individuals who the first 12 months are recently released. So with that, I ask you a green vote to return. I won't do an opening in essence of keeping things moving, but that's essentially what we're doing, is moving it from 25% to 10%. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Any discussion on the motion to return the bill? I see none. Senator Wayne recognized close. Waives closing. Question for the body is to return the bill to select file for our amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
46 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the motion to return the bill.
Motion successful. Senator Wayne recognized open. He waives opening. I see no discussion. He waives closing. Question with the body is the adoption of AM 2587. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. All voted. Record, please.
46 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the select file amendment.
The amendment has been adopted. Senator McKinney for a motion.
Mr. President, I move to advance LB 917 to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 917 advances. Next bill, please.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1024. Senator Wayne would move to return the bill for specific amendment. Senator, I have 2731 with a note you wish to withdraw that amendment. Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to return for AM 2759.
Senator Wayne recognized open on your motion.
So that's the right amendment? Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're returning this for, if you recall, Senator Friesen and I had a lot of the conversations. Senator Wishart and Senator Flood had conversations around the second and third district as it relates to the capital construction projects. We came to an agreement on that, so we're returning it back. But essentially, as we started looking at this and we look at the fiscal note, what had happened was there's a $10 million transfer of general funds. Initially, fiscal and everybody thought that $10 million would be used to administer. And it was always Senator McKinney and I believe that the administration part of this would come from ARPA. So we specifically outlined ARPA as a $10 million ARPA request to administer. And part of the reason why it's important that we have this administration cost to DED is because we want to make sure we're being held accountable. The worst thing I want to happen is a project that slips through and it gets clawed back. So we want to make sure DED has the staff and appropriate people to, one, make sure we have a coordinated plan, but two, hold us accountable in the year's future. So it's those two things that require us to bring this back. Trust me, I don't want to bring this back. I would like this to move forward, but I do think it's important we have an accountability piece. And I do think anytime we can to try to work with senators to make sure we come to an agreement, we can do that, and this amendment accomplishes both of those. So I would ask to return this to final reading, to select file, and then I would ask for a green vote on AM 2759. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Is there any discussion of Senator Wayne's motion? I see none. Senator Wayne recognizes closing. Waives closing. Question of the body is the motion to return the bill to select file for specific amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. If you all voted, record, please.
45 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the motion to return the bill.
The bill's been returned to select file. Senator Wayne, you recognized open on your amendment.
Again, this just adds a piece of accountability, making sure that we have staffing, or it could be contracted, but we want to make sure we have an accountability piece to administer these funds, including the Capital Projects Fund. The agreement also includes agreement between Senator Friesen, myself, Senator Wishart, and Senator Flood regarding the second and third district and how the capital construction projects will be used. With that, I'd ask for a green vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Discussion on Senator Wayne's amendment. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Wayne. So I'll just explain really quickly what we're dealing with here, and part of the money that's being used in this this whole bill is the $128 million that the governor had said would go to broadband. And so this money, what was kind of special about this pot of money that I learned about a little bit late in the program was it doesn't require any kind of a match. So if you wanted to go out and build broadband in the really sparse areas of the state where companies can't make a fiscal case to go out there, even with the 25-75 match program that we have now, this is dollars that could have been used to build broadband out into those hard to build areas because it required no match on the federal part. The governor had indicated all along, and I think the Appropriations Committee recognized this, that this was money the governor was going to appropriate to broadband in some form or fashion. And so we had been told that too. We kind of left it alone. Senator Wayne saw a pot of money, and there were some others here who thought they could bring home some projects for their district, and they did. And we've reached an agreement where the money is going to be divided up by congressional district. But in the 3rd congressional district where I'm at, it will only be available to communities of second-class cities or smaller. Because these are the communities I felt that we've totally ignored in this whole coronavirus era. They're the ones that have received the less aid, and they don't have the infrastructure, the nonprofits to help them navigate the rent assistance. They've been pretty well operating on their own. And so for now, at least, I would say that this in this district would only be available to those second-class cities or smaller. They could use it to partner with a broadband provider to put broadband in their community, because those are the communities that can be hard to serve also. They could use it for community buildings like Senator Wayne, I think, and some others are thinking of doing. It's kind of highly restricted, so I don't know that it will all be able to be used in those communities. But I think in future legislatures, if that money is still there and it's not being used, I would hope that you would appropriate it to somehow try and push that money out to those rural communities in some other fashion where they could use it. So I do support the amendment, and I will support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Senator Bossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Wayne, yield to a question.
Senator Wayne, would you yield, please?
Yes.
So obviously, this will be a broadband question. How does this affect outside of the small towns? In other words, our farmers and ranchers and that, does this keep those funds from going there? Because when we talk about broadband and having zero match, that's the most important funds that can come into these communities, these areas. Because a lot of times the cities or towns, you know, the providers will go there, but they're not going to go 4 or 5 miles, 20 miles outside of town.
So the thought process between myself and Senator Friesen was we would start with the smallest communities in the 3rd district, second class and lower, and then next year that those dollars be reappropriated. So we were going to start there because those were some of the hardest hit who don't have as much resources, and then following the application process next year, it would be reappropriated.
But it does it allow to go outside of those towns?
Well, in the 1st congressional district, it does allow it to go outside of those towns, not the 3rd necessarily.
Okay, thank you, Senator Wayne. That's my biggest concern with this is the funding that did come in there. The challenge we have in rural Nebraska is our communities usually can, providers will come and sometimes can make a business decision to go in and build into those areas. But once you go outside of the city, the village, the town, whatever it is, they can't find a business model, that can't find feasibility for them to do that. So that's my concern. The funds that we did have there that would have provided those opportunities, I'm afraid that it's diminishing that. It's one thing to put it in our small towns, which is great if they build enough to where they can to then go outside of towns is one thing, but I'm afraid that once we build into a small town, there's no desire anymore for anyone to provide or to build outside of that town. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Bossman. I see no further discussion. Senator Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank Senator Friesen, Senator Flood, and Senator Wishart for working on this amendment. Again, it is a way to add accountability from a DED standpoint and reach some of the hardest hit communities or left behind communities, as Senator Friesen quietly said, as it relates to some of the small towns and villages in the 3rd district. So I would ask you to vote green This is a compromise amendment, and just so everybody knows that we are actually reducing the amount going to North and South Omaha to pay for the accountability piece in this. The $10 million is coming directly from the North and South Omaha census tracts to run the entire program, and that includes the rural qualified census tracts to make sure they're also being held accountable for the projects they do. So we are reducing our part because we think accountability to this body is more important at this point, to show that once we make an investment in North Omaha of this magnitude, we can truly make a difference, and we'll be accountable through the whole process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Members, the question for the body is the adoption of AM 2759. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
45 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the select file amendment.
AM 2759 has been adopted. Senator McKinney for motion.
Mr. President, I move to advance LB 1024E to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 1024E is now advanced. And finally, LB 1173E. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Hunt would move to return 1173 to select file to consider AM 2597.
Senator Hunt, you recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. After the notification portions of my LB 932 were amended onto LB 1173 with AM 2200, it's a lot of numbers. So let me tell you what it is. So my bill to say that when the state is taking the Social Security funds of foster youth, they have to notify the foster youth or their guardians or their caretakers, whoever is in charge of them. They can't just take Social Security payments from foster youth without any notification of that. Senator Arch's office worked with the Legislative Fiscal Office and DHHS's fiscal staff to try to find a way to bring the cost of doing that notification down so we could reduce the fiscal note associated with my portion of the bill. And we put our heads together and figured out how to reduce the fiscal note as much as possible for final reading and before the A bill for the HHS Christmas tree package. And this amendment is the product of that discussion. The department thought that as written, the amendment would have required 2 additional staff members at a cost of $128,000 a year to carry out the additional tracking and accounting requirements in the handling of foster children's Social Security benefits. With this amended language that we're voting on today, DHHS has agreed to forego the need for a new accountant position, so we're just looking at 1 full-time employee for an additional caseworker, plus the necessary IT changes to implement the bill. Senator Arch is supportive of this and the advocates that worked on the board. And, I think it's important that we're still doing something beneficial for the youth here. Children in foster care who receive Social Security payments, these are really the most disadvantaged of our disadvantaged kids in a lot of ways because they're foster youth, and if they're receiving Social Security payments, it's because they've had the death of a parent or because they have a disability. So these are kids who really need every advantage that we can give them, and I think the very least we can do is let them know that we're taking their payments, because right now there's just no transparency around that at all. Another sticking point for DHHS was the inclusion of all communications from the Federal Social Security Administration, which is because they are paper-based and can't be automated, so that makes sense to me. So we removed that requirement in this amendment, and we also loosened the time frame during which notice must be provided from immediate to within 30 days after the department receiving the first payment on behalf of the child. Again, this amendment was formulated with my office, Senator Arch's office, Legislative Fiscal, DHHS Fiscal, and advocates. It's something we're all on board with. It will reduce the fiscal note while still providing really important due process to foster youth that are in the care of the state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hunt. I see no discussion. Senator Hunt, did you care to close? She waives closing. Question for the body is the motion to return the bill to select file for specific amendment. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
44 ayes, no nays on the motion to return the bill.
AM 2597. Senator Hunt, did you have any additional comments to offer? She waives that opportunity. Question for the body is the adoption of AM 2597. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
46 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the select file amendment.
AM 2597 has been adopted. Senator McKinney for motion.
Mr. President, I move to advance LB 1173E to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is adopted. While legislation is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign to hereby sign the following three bills: LB 1014E, LB 1084, and LB 1083E. Additional items for the record. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, letters of transmittals from the clerk to the Secretary of State regarding the overrides of LBs 1011, 1012, and 1013. Also, communication from the clerk to the Secretary of State regarding Legislative Bill 1073. Senator Wayne, an amendment to 1024A to be printed. I have a new resolution by Senator Lathrop and the membership that will be laid over at this time, and explanation of vote from Senator Slum. That's all that I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, we have a number of bills on select file. Please be attentive to select file voice votes. LB 800, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 800, the enrollment and review amendments were considered and adopted on March 28. I now have other amendments. Senator Bostar has AM 2352.
Senator Bostar, I recognize to open your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. AM 2352 represents the addition of LB 1176 to LB 800. LB 1176 was introduced in follow-up to a bill introduced by Senator Linehan last year as LB 674. LB 1176 seeks to address an oversight in the initial adoption of Nebraska statutes that allowed Nebraska to opt into the federal Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program. Senator Linehan's LB 674 from last year offered two adjustments to address those oversights. First, it clarified the application of earned tax credits to retaliatory fire premium taxes. Second, it clarified the date at which a partner in an affordable housing project could establish their interest to be eligible to claim credits. LB 1176 presented this year clarifies the application of the credits to retaliatory fire insurance premium taxes as before, but adjusts the proposed date of acquisition of an ownership interest to February 15th of the tax year. This change of date should allow relevant state agencies additional time to process claim credits and should help in their effort to handle returns. LB 1176 advanced from the Revenue Committee unanimously and engendered no opposition during the hearing. And with that, I would appreciate your approval of adoption of AM 2352 to LB 800. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Bostar. Discussion on the amendment. Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm sorry, Senator Bostar, I didn't give you a heads up, but can you tell me again what we're doing here?
Senator Bostar, yield, please.
Yes,
It's a revenue bill, I hear.
it is indeed.
Yeah. I pay attention. I can't keep up with everything, but I do try to keep up with this.
This is AM 2352 is adding LB 1176 to LB 800. And that was the bill that addresses the omission of retaliatory fire premium taxes from our affordable housing tax credit program. Because when the statutes were written to allow our state to opt into the federal Affordable housing tax credit program, the statute was written in such a way where we essentially grabbed all of the taxes within the revenue code. However, these specific taxes related to fire, premium insurance, and retaliatory taxes don't exist within that area of statute.
Yeah, I remember this, yes.
So this is saying that these tax credits can be used for those taxes as well.
So here's my question. Can we put a revenue bill on an urban affairs bill?
I believe so.
Okay, I'm looking at the front. Seems odd to me. What did you say the vote was coming out, got out of committee?
It was unanimous.
It was got out of committee.
I appreciated your
Senator Brizzi
support.
is thinking, I'm telling, sit down and be quiet. Is that what you're saying, Senator? Okay. I would like some clarification from the front as to whether this is okay to do. Thank you, Senator Bostar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Linehan and Senator Bosar. Senator Erdman, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Senator Linehan was on the edge of saying not germane, but she didn't say that. But I do have a few questions that Senator Bostar would answer.
Senator Bosar, would you yield?
Absolutely.
Okay, Senator Bostar, I'm looking up 176. If you would, can you find that bill you introduced? I have a question about that on page 6.
On page 6 of 1176?
Yep, that's correct. Line 3, it says an insurance company described in this section shall receive a credit on the tax imposed under this section as prescribed in the Affordable Housing Tax Act. And those are the fire insurance companies. Is that what you're trying to get at? Is that the plan?
Yes, essentially the tax we're adding is fire insurance premium retaliatory taxes.
Okay, tell me how that works.
So insurance premium taxes, if an insurance company is domiciled in Nebraska,
Okay,
they will pay our
1% premium tax.
Our premium tax. If that company sells into a state that has a lower premium tax, they can apply a retaliatory tax in response to the variation in premium tax rate. And that's what we're talking about here with these taxes.
Okay, so where's that tax going to go when it's collected? Who's it going to, this is a refund to somebody, correct?
Sure, it's a tax credit. So you could use the tax credit to offset a tax liability.
So who would be available to have that offset? A housing authority, or who would do that?
Yes, so if you are developing affordable housing in line with the regulations and requirements under the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act,
Correct.
You would then earn these tax credits and could either transfer them, sell them, or use them yourselves to offset a tax liability.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you're increasing the amount of incentive that an affordable housing contractor or somebody's building. Is that right?
Yes, we are making the tax credits more attractive, more valuable without, also I should have added, this has no fiscal note. This doesn't change fundamentally the tax credits themselves. Doesn't add new tax credits.
I know they recommend.
It doesn't alter those in any way. It just makes them more attractive on the secondary market, because pretty much what happens is the developer these credits will then sell them.
Okay. All right. So what happens if we don't do this?
If we don't do this, these tax credits will continue to not be eligible for use on retaliatory fire premium taxes.
Okay.
And which would limit their usability. So we would, as a state, we would still be spending exactly the same amount of money. Federal government would be spending exactly the same amount of money on these tax credits. but they wouldn't have the same value. So by allowing them to be more valuable, we're making the development of housing more attractive.
1 minute.
Okay. So explain to me, if you can, in a short time, how, as Senator Linehan mentioned, the revenue bill 1176 is germane to LB 800. Explain that.
So I was informed that this bill was germane, and I think Senator Wayne, as chair of the Urban Affairs Committee, would probably be a better person to explain that if you wouldn't mind asking him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Urban. Senator Bostar. Senator Linehan, you're recognized.
So this amendment, now that I understand what's going on, is fine. And I agree that Senator Wayne can probably describe better why it's germane. The point is, it's all about housing. And this AM amendment has been in front of the committee about 3 different times. I think Senator Bostar and others have worked on it for 2 years. There was issues. Those issues have gone away, and they've been worked out with everyone, so it's fine. Sorry for the questions. Thank you, Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Urban, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see Senator Wayne moving to his mic, so I think he must have ESPN because he thinks I'm going to ask him a question, which is correct. Senator Wayne, you yielded a question?
Senator Wayne, would you yield?
Yes, we're just getting so close that I can finish your sentence now.
Thank you. I got it. So Senator Bostar said you are the expert to ask how this is germane. Can you go through that?
Yes, real quickly. So LB 555, which deals with municipal density and missing middle income housing act, is part of this bill. Also LB 727, which deals with redundant language LB 799, which deals with middle income housing act, is a part of this bill. So there's 2 out of the 5 or 6 bills that deal specifically with middle income housing and affordable housing in general. And so this bill actually just clarifies the tax credits on affordable housing. But because the way our committees are structured, if the word tax is in there, it goes to revenue. But this strictly is affordable housing, and Urban Affairs deals with all the affordable housing issues. So this could have went to either committee. We chose not to re-reference or try to get it there because previously this bill has been introduced there. So we just left it there. But because this deals with affordable housing, and there's at least 2, if not 3 areas of this bill that deals with affordable housing, it is germane.
Okay, you may have saved me a headache there or a problem. So let me ask you this then. How much revenue do you think we're talking about in this premium tax for the fire companies?
So actually, there's no fiscal note to it. This just clarifies where people were already operating. There was some confusion between firefighters and some other people of how the language reads, and so this just clarifies that there's no fiscal note attached to this. And I forgot one other bill, LB 724 deals with affordable housing too. So there's 3 bills in this package that all came out 7-0 unanimous in our committee that deal with affordable housing.
Okay. All right. So in the conversation I had with Senator Bostar, he mentioned it makes it more valuable. Okay. So there's got to be a value there or it wouldn't be more valuable. So somebody's going to get a significant increase in some kind of tax incentive from doing this. What is that number? Is it just whatever we think it is, or how do you figure out what that is?
So there isn't a number. This is about accessing more federal tax credits. That's why it's no impact on the state. So by clarifying this, we believe that builders will be able to access more of the federal housing tax credit, not here locally.
So how much will that be?
It's not predictable at this point. Senator Bostar might be able to talk about the exact dollar amount a little more than I can.
Okay.
I was here for germaneness only. I'll yield you some of my time to ask that question.
Job. You didn't have any time yet. Senator Bostar, will you yield the question?
Senator Bostar, would you yield?
Yes, I would. So
Okay, go ahead.
I think I understand the question. this isn't changing the number of tax credits that are going to be issued or are allotted for it all. It makes them more valuable because the developer who earns the tax credit from developing affordable housing generally sells the tax credit on the secondary market. And the more avenues that you can apply that tax credit to offset tax liability, the more valuable in the marketplace that one tax credit is. So that's why we're able to make our tax credits more valuable without actually spending any more money, because we're just letting it be used in more places, but they're all going to be used.
1 minute.
So we're increasing the value in the secondary market for the tax credits, thereby incentivizing further the development of affordable housing. I hope that makes sense.
It doesn't. That's okay, because I'm not voting for it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman and Senator Bostar. Senator Lathrop would like to welcome 35 fourth grade students from St. Gerald's in Ralston. They are seated in the north balcony. Please rise and be welcomed by your Nebraska Legislature. Returning to debate, Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
I'll yield my time to Senator Erdman if he wants it.
Senator Erdman, 455.
I'll pass.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Erdman. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Bostar, you recognize to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I think that this is a pretty, there are complexities about how the tax credits work, but we are not creating the tax credits. We're allowing them to be used for one additional type of tax. To give just a little bit of background on that, why this particular kind of tax, these fire insurance premium retaliatory taxes, don't exist in the same area of statute as everything else, and why they were missed the first time is because those taxes were initially used to fund the fire marshal's office and operation. So they were kind of placed into statute alongside the operations they'd be funding. They no longer do that. They're now just, those taxes are sent directly to the general fund, just like everything else. But so that's how they were missed. And this is simply fixing something that I think from the inception of our opting in of this federal program, it was always the idea to make it so that these tax credits could be used for any of these kind of taxes. With that, I want to thank you for your time, and I'd ask you to vote for AM 2352.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 2352. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, 1 nay on the adoption of Senator Bostar's amendment.
AM 2352 is adopted. Mr. Clerk, for an amendment.
Senator Blood, AM 2210.
Senator Blood, you recognize to open on AM 2210.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I rise to bring forward AM 2210, and I thank Senator Wayne for helping me find a vehicle for this amendment. What AM 2210 does is prohibit cities of the first and second class, and I really hope people are listening to this because I know that somebody's been advocating against it, so please listen to what this bill actually does. So it prohibits cities of the first and second class, villages, or planning commissions from granting a conditional use permit known as a CUP or tax increment financing known as TIF to any developer delinquent in the payment of real property taxes. It requires any RFPs by Community Redevelopment Authority or Community Development Agency to state that no redevelopment contract will be entered into with a developer who is delinquent in the payment of any real property taxes owed to the city. AM 2210 was originally introduced as LB 695 and has a white copy amendment attached from the Urban Affairs Committee. The amendment did two things. It changed the bill to only prohibit granting CUPs and redevelopment contracts to entities who are more than 180 days delinquent in the payment of the property taxes included in the permit application. Additionally, it allows for a clause for cities, counties, or villages to waive the prohibition if the delinquent taxes owed are in dispute, on appeal, or the result of an administrative error. So it does allow, if there are concerns, for there to be an out. We did this in an effort to work with the League of Municipalities and NACO about the minor concerns they had with the bill. This bill is necessary to prevent situations like what just happened at Alt N. This ethanol plant owed $518,000 in back payments of real property taxes to Saunders County. Yet we're granted a CUP that ultimately led to the crisis which is still occurring today. I believe that when entering into redevelopment contract with a developer, and especially when giving them funds, we need to know that they are at least responsible enough to pay their property taxes. And I see this as the bare minimum. It's no secret that Nebraska has issues with our high property taxes in the state. And the problem is made worse by the folks who do not pay them. If we want to keep property taxes down, we must make sure the funds due are paid into the coffers. In no universe should we be supporting people not paying their property taxes, and we definitely should not be giving them permission for new developments and to spend the taxpayers' money on more failed businesses. While drafting this bill, really all I could think about was Wimpy from Popeye, who would say, "I would gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today," and Tuesday never came. I will remind everybody that we are a Dillon's Rule state, and local government exercises the powers that we as a state body legislate to local government. We aren't passing down an unfunded mandate or telling them not to grow. We are asking them to help us keep property taxes at bay to ensure that everyone pays their fair share, and allowing an out if someone is in dispute about what they owe. I urge a green vote on this amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I want to add that if you remember my freshman year, I brought forward a bill that said that you couldn't run for office unless you paid your NADC fines, and that received, I think, almost every vote except one or two in the body that day. And we said that we needed an out, and we allowed for that on that bill as well, that if you were disputing the fact that you owed those fees, we allowed for a waiver. That's the same thing I'm doing with this bill. It was the residents of Meade that expressed their concern at the town hall that we had that said, why can't something be done about this? Why can't we allow our local government the ability to say, stop, if you want to grow in our community, you need to pay the property taxes that you owe us first. And if there's a reasonable explanation, they have that ability to say, okay, we're going to waive it. We think you have a reasonable explanation. Let's move forward. Either we believe people have to pay their property taxes or we don't. Either we believe that local government has the ability to say, wait a minute, we want you to be good stewards before you move into our communities, or not. It's really that simple. So I do ask for your green vote, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And it's my understanding there are some questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Colterman would like to welcome 12 fourth grade students from St. Joseph's School in York. They are also seated in the north balcony. Please rise and be welcomed by your Nebraska Legislature. Debate is now open on AM 2210. Senator Linehan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Senator Blood, would you yield to some questions, please?
Senator Blood, would you yield?
I will.
So this was referred to the Urban Affairs Committee?
This was referred to the Urban Affairs Committee.
But it's about property taxes.
I don't know what to tell you. It was referred to Urban Affairs.
Okay. So is it deal with anything but property taxes?
It's, yes, conditional use permits and
Okay.
TIF, which is why I think Urban Affairs got it. So property taxes is the underlying issue.
Okay. Besides the plant in Meade, is this a big issue?
Yeah, I mean, as big as issue as it was when we were talking about people who didn't pay NADC fines,
No, do you have any other examples where this has happened?
I don't with me, but I can get them for you if you like. So I do know that there has been people in
Did
arrears
the
that have
counties,
received
did
TIF.
NACO support this bill?
After we amended it to give the waiver.
How
NACO
about this?
and the League of Municipalities both gave support after we added the waiver.
And what does the waiver do?
Again, the waiver says that if you are in dispute or you feel that there's been an error in something the administration did, or there's an appeal, that it allows for a clause for the cities, counties, or villages to waive that prohibition of the delinquent taxes. So if owed or in dispute or on appeal or the result of an administrative error.
So I'm sorry. So the company in Meade got, what did they get? What did they get? Did they get, they were TIFed by whom?
They were TIFed, they received care funds. They were TIFed by the county because you get your TIF from the county.
So
or
the county,
municipality.
knowing that they owed $548,000, TIFed them.
You know, to be really frank, I don't remember the circumstances. That was the example when we wrote the bill, and I was told by the citizens. All I know is they were given TIF, and I can't remember if it was the municipality or the county. I do know that Nebraska gave them CARES funds, even though they were also in arrears in their property taxes, which we didn't address.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Blood. I'm sorry, Senator Breezy, I did not give you a heads up. Could you yield to a question?
Senator Breezy, would you yield?
Yes.
Do you remember this being in committee?
Yes.
Did you vote it out of committee?
No.
Why did you not vote it out of committee?
Number one, there weren't other examples of the need for this beyond the one that has been described here. And number two, I think localities have the discretion to allow the use of TIF. They have the discretion to grant a conditional use permit, and they can hinge those decisions upon whether property taxes are delinquent or late, it seems to me anyway.
So you saw it as basically a local issue.
Seems to me that it would be, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm not going to support this because I do think, here's something I learned a long time ago. I don't remember who told me this, but bad cases make bad law. So when you have one case that's as bad as the situation in Meade, and you start writing laws just addressing that one bad case, you end up doing things unintended consequences. So it may be a great idea. I'm not going to fight it all day or anything, but I don't think we should be writing a law because clearly there were mistakes made in Meade. Plus, if you're TIFing something and your county is TIFing somebody that's delinquent in taxes, that's a problem with your county board. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Linehan, Senator Blood, and Senator Breezy. Senator Jacobson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess when I hear TIF, I always see it as an opportunity to maybe use that as an educational opportunity. A couple things I'm hearing this morning that probably need to be corrected is that, first of all, counties do not issue TIF, it's cities. So the property must be within the city limits to be able to be eligible for TIF. So it'd have to be the city. Secondly, when you're looking at property taxes, remember that if a property taxes are delinquent, then there are tax certificates that are generally sold because they earn 14% interest, and it's something generally people seek to get. Also, I would tell you if there's a lender involved, that lender has a lien on the property. That lender, those property taxes become a super priority lien ahead of the lender. So the lender has an incentive to either buy those property taxes, or in many cases, their loan agreements are set up to where they have the right to go ahead and pay the taxes on behalf of the borrower and then add it to their note. The other thing I would clarify is keep in mind under TIF, when you have TIF a project, you divide the taxes. So whatever the current tax base is remains on the current tax rolls, gets divided and goes to the taxing authorities as it always has. It's the incremental increase in value that gets divided. And then that incremental increase, then that share of the property taxes goes back to the developer to repay the TIF bond. So if they don't pay their property taxes, they're not paying themselves. That's the source of repayment to their TIF bond. So I see this as a very one-off. I think as Senator Breezy had indicated, and we're going to have a carve out for the municipalities anyhow. I think it's belt and suspenders. I don't think it's necessary. I think we're giving the municipalities to make that decision. They will make that decision based upon the facts. But I just wanted to bring a couple of clarifications as to how TIF works and the fact that and the fact that there are tax certificates that are generally sold. So when the tax certificates are sold, all the taxing authorities receive their tax dollars once those certificates are sold. So it's just a minor delay in the timing. So I'm just not sure that this does a lot. So that's what I have. Thank you. And I thank you again, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Jacobson. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. So as I listened to the discussion and also to Senator Blood's description, so let me see, and Senator Blood can listen to my comments to see if I get this right. So what Senator Blood is saying, that if you're delinquent on your property tax for 180 days or more, and then you apply for a project that qualifies for TIF, you will not be eligible for TIF. So would Senator Blood yield to a question and answer whether that statement was true or not?
Senator Blood, would you yield?
I'm sorry, Senator Erdman, would you repeat that?
Okay. So I believe what you're trying to say is if you're delinquent on your property tax for more than 180 days, and I think the smaller counties or cities had 280 days or whatever it was I read, then you make an application for a TIF project, you won't be eligible for the TIF project. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Depends on the
so where did I miss it?
circumstances. So as I just said in my introduction and to Senator Linehan, that county, that village, that municipality has the ability to also waive it. For instance, if it's in dispute, if indeed
Okay.
there was an error.
All right. So if I'm delinquent and there's no deficiency, there's no issue, say I'm just delinquent because I didn't pay them and I don't have a dispute with the county or the assessor, then I would not be eligible for TIF, correct?
Right, I have the right to refuse you TIF.
Okay. So can they now currently, if they're doing a project and someone applies, can they now check to see if they're delinquent?
They can check, but they can't necessarily refuse based on that under state statute.
So if they discover someone is delinquent, can they deny the TIF project?
Under state statute, that is not part of the guidelines for them to be able to refuse TIF.
I'm having
They
a
would,
tough time
they
hearing
would,
you.
we have strict guidelines on, we have some strict guidelines on TIF.
Can they deny the project, yes or no?
They could, but not use that as the reason.
Say that again?
They could, but not use that as the actual reason.
So I think, okay, thank you for answering. I think what we're doing here is very similar to what Senator Jacobson alluded to and Senator Breezy. They can do it now. So if we don't do this, they can do the same thing. I don't think this is necessary. One other thing that Senator Jacobson left out on his description of how TIF works is once they pay their property tax, they take out the tax of what the original value was, and then the incremental increase, the tax that's paid on that is sent back to the bondholder plus interest. It's plus interest. And he said these certificates are sold. That is probably a misnomer. I've tried to get in a position to buy these TIF bonds, never have been able to, because either the bank gets them or the contractor or someone else. And by the way, they get to negotiate what the interest rate is. They get to negotiate the interest rate. And so if I'm in a position to be eligible to buy TIF bonds and I can negotiate the percentage of interest, I'm very interested in buying those bonds. And so don't think that this TIF projects that get TIF reimbursed from the county on their property tax are just getting their property tax back. They're getting interest on top of that. Some of them as high as 7%. It's a sweetheart deal. So I'm not going to support 2210. I haven't decided yet when I'm going to vote for 800, but we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Blood and Senator Erdman. Mr. Clerk for items.
Mr. President, thank you. Bills read on final reading this morning were presented to the governor at 11:35. Senator Vargas would like to add his name to 852. And Senator Breesy would move to recess the body until 1:00 p.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. We are in recess.